"Excuse me, this can't be serious," Veronica Kingsley said, her voice laced with disdain as she looked at the plate in front of her. She lifted a delicate, manicured hand and poked at the glazed duck breast with the tip of her knife as though it might bite her back. "Is this what passes for gourmet here? You call this fine dining?" Whispers swept through the chic dining room of Le Papillon Noir, one of the newest culinary gems tucked into the heart of Manhattan. The restaurant had become a sensation overnight, not for its marketing or celebrity endorsements, but for something harder to define: soul. Veronica didn't care about soul. She cared about status. She had swept into the restaurant an hour earlier, a walking portrait of luxury, trailed by two personal assistants and a social media intern filming her every move. A long, white mink coat draped off her shoulders. Her heels echoed across the polished floors like she owned them. Her lips were drawn in a scowl from the moment she saw the restaurant's name on the door. "I'm not eating anything until I know who's cooking," she had announced loudly, glancing around at the minimalist decor with mild disgust. "And it better not be some TikTok clown trying to be edgy." The hostess, a nervous young woman named Grace, offered a tight-lipped smile. "Chef Marcus Johnson is our head chef and owner. He's actually quite renowned, Marcus Johnson." Veronica cut her off with a laugh that could slice through glass. "Let me guess. Grew up in the Bronx, cooked for his grandma, and now thinks he's the next Gordon Ramsay because someone on Yelp liked his kale salad." Her voice carried, and several diners turned in their seats, but Veronica didn't notice or didn't care. She was too busy inspecting the chandelier with thinly veiled contempt. From the kitchen, Marcus heard every word. He always did. The kitchen of Le Papillon Noir was open by design. He wanted his team to see the people they were cooking for, to connect, to remember why they started. Marcus stood tall, arms folded across his apron. He was 38, broad-shouldered and confident, with close-cropped hair and deep brown eyes that said everything he didn't. He had fought his way through culinary school on scholarships and grit. His resume spanned Michelin-starred kitchens in Paris, Tokyo, and Cape Town. He had cooked for presidents, celebrities, and kings. But this was different. Veronica's words weren't new. He had heard them before on the streets, in school, in the kitchens of arrogant chefs who saw his skin before his skills. But tonight, her cruelty struck something deeper. Because tonight, his mother was in the corner booth, watching. Martha Johnson sat silently, fingers wrapped around a cup of tea, her eyes steady on her son. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, but Marcus knew. She heard it too. "Fire up table 7 again," Marcus said quietly. "Let's show her exactly who she's laughing at." "Chef, are you sure?" asked Luis, his sous chef, glancing nervously through the pass. "She's already insulted the duck and the risotto before that. She's not going to change her mind." Marcus didn't blink. "She doesn't have to. Her taste buds will." Meanwhile, at her table, Veronica pushed her plate away dramatically and snapped her fingers. "Excuse me, I'd like to speak to the chef. Immediately." "Is he hiding in the back, or what?" Grace tried to smile again, but it wavered. "Chef Marcus is preparing your next course personally, ma'am." "He preparing?" Veronica laughed cruelly. "What's he doing? Chasing down a chicken? In the alley? In the kitchen?" Marcus set down his knife with care. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But something simmered under the surface, more potent than rage. He walked to the back pantry and pulled out ingredients with the precision of a symphony conductor: black garlic, bone marrow, hand-rolled pappardelle, imported truffle from Alba. And then at the center of the dish, braised oxtail, his mother's recipe. "Let's dance," he muttered. Back at the table, Veronica scrolled through her phone, laughing at her own Instagram story. "Here we are at some little urban hidden gem," she said to her followers. "Food's mediocre. Ambiance is, well, it tries. But you know how it is. Gotta support the struggling arts." Martha heard that too. She rose from her booth, walked over with Grace, and stood beside Veronica's table. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I couldn't help overhearing." I hope you give the food a chance before you decide it's not for you. Veronica looked up, confused. And who are you? The PR lady. No, Martha said calmly. I'm the chef's mother. Veronica blinked, then smirked. Well, then, you must be very proud of your little boy. Martha didn't rise to the bait. I am. Before Veronica could reply, a quiet hush fell over the room as Marcus himself walked through the double doors, carrying a steaming dish on a tray. Not a server, not a runner, the chef. He set it down with quiet ceremony in front of Veronica. This, he said, voice low and smooth, is braised oxtail with black garlic reduction, hand-cut pappardelle and marrow foam. The recipe is 100 years old. My great-grandmother taught it to my mother, and my mother taught it to me. I hope you'll find it worth your time. Veronica blinked. Oxtail. Yes, Marcus said simply. She stared at the plate, hesitating. Well, he said, folding his arms. You asked to speak to the chef. I'm here. Now taste the food. There was a pause. Long, sharp. The room was silent. Veronica picked up her fork. Slowly, cautiously. She twirled the pasta, lifted it to her mouth, took a bite, and everything stopped. The flavor hit her tongue like a memory she didn't know she had. Rich, layered, soulful. The oxtail melted against her teeth, tender and deep with umami. The garlic reduction folded around it like velvet. The marrow added a whisper of smoke, of earth, of something ancient. She took another bite, then another. Her fork trembled, and then, to her horror, tears welled in her eyes, real tears. The kind that come not from spice or heat, but from something deeper, something spiritual. Veronica tried to blink them away, but it was too late. Her lip quivered. She set down her fork. Her shoulders shook. She began, but her voice broke. Marcus watched her, unreadable. Veronica wiped at her eyes, laughing weakly. I don't know what's happening. This tastes like something I forgot I needed. Marcus didn't answer. He just looked at her, waiting. Finally, she whispered, It tastes like my grandmother's stew. When I was 6, I didn't even know I remembered it. But this brought it back. The silence in the restaurant was now reverent. Veronica looked up at Marcus with new eyes, humble, shaken. I'm sorry, she said, voice cracking. I judged you. I mocked you. And you gave me this. Marcus stepped forward, his voice soft but unwavering. My food is my story, and I serve it with all I have. Not because I need approval, but because it matters. Veronica nodded, tears falling now, uncaring who saw. It does. It really does. Martha stood behind her son, pride glowing on her face. Would you like to meet the woman who taught me this? Marcus asked quietly. Veronica turned, saw Martha again, and this time stood. Yes, please. They embraced, not as enemies, but as people. Humbled, changed, and all around them. In the heart of Le Papillon Noir, the sound of forks gently meeting plates resumed. But in the soul of one woman, who came to laugh and stayed to weep, something had been rewritten forever. Veronica remained standing beside Martha, unable to find the right words. She had come in here ready to mock, to post snide reviews and gather a few pity likes from her followers. But now, every bite of that dish echoed something buried inside her, something she thought was long gone. May I? She asked quietly, motioning toward the chair beside Martha. Martha nodded, of course. As Veronica sat down, her social media assistant, still recording discreetly from afar, looked utterly confused. But Veronica waved her off. No more filming, she said softly. Turn it off. Back in the kitchen, Louise peeked through the swinging doors. Stunned. Chef, she's sitting with your mom. She's not yelling. She's crying. Marcus nodded without a word, setting down a sauté pan with calm precision. Do you want us to comp the meal? Another chef asked, still shaken by the earlier tension. Marcus shook his head. No, she's paying for every bite, but we'll add a side of understanding. On the house, Veronica leaned forward, her voice trembling. I don't know how to explain this. That dish, it reminded me of my Nana back in Louisiana. She used to make something just like it when I was little. I thought I hated soul food. I told myself I was better than that, moved to the city, changed my accent, buried all of it. But this. She paused, exhaling shakily. You brought it back. Martha smiled gently. That's what food can do. When it's made with heart, it doesn't just feed the body, it tells the truth. Veronica nodded slowly. That truth hurts. In a good way. She looked across the dining room to Marcus, who was now speaking quietly with the young line cook. He's incredible, she whispered. And I disrespected him. I didn't even see him. I just saw. Martha waited patiently. His skin, Veronica finished. Barely audible. I saw his skin and assumed everything else. Martha placed her hand over Veronica's. Now you've seen more. Veronica lowered her head. He deserves better than me sitting here. Maybe. But maybe this is exactly where you're supposed to be right now. After a long moment, Veronica stood, slowly, hesitantly. She crossed the floor toward the kitchen doors. The staff watched in a mixture of awe and wariness as she stepped inside, her heels no longer sounding like weapons, but apologies. Marcus looked up as she approached. I hope you're not here to send it back. Veronica held up both hands. No, never again. There was silence, thick, charged. I was awful, she said, her voice raw, and not because the food was bad. It wasn't. It was perfect. I was awful because I wanted to feel powerful. I thought tearing you down would make me look superior. But now I see how small that made me. Marcus watched her, expression unreadable. I've spent years laughing at people who reminded me of where I came from, she continued. I thought being cold made me elite, but it just made me empty. She looked around the kitchen clean, buzzing with focused movement, laughter, quiet respect. I've never seen a kitchen like this, she whispered. That's because it isn't a kitchen, Marcus said calmly. It's a temple. Veronica's breath hitched. Marcus didn't move closer. I didn't cook that dish to prove anything to you. I cooked it because someone needed to remember it. You just happened to be the one who needed it most. Her eyes welled up again. Can I do anything to make it right? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded toward the dish station. Wash the dishes. Veronica blinked. What? You want to make it right, he repeated. Start by respecting the hands that do the hardest work. Wash the dishes. She hesitated, looked down at her pristine white blouse, her diamond bracelets. Then, without a word, she removed her coat, stepped behind the line, and rolled up her sleeves. The kitchen staff stared in stunned silence. Even Luisa's mouth fell open. She took the sponge, squirted soap into a basin, and began scrubbing the dishes she had dirtied herself. Her assistants peered in from the dining room in utter disbelief. One tried to step in. Miss Kingsley, what are you doing? You can't. She raised a hand. Go home. But your image, she cut her off. Let it change. And it did. She washed in silence for nearly an hour. Her fingers turned raw. The grime didn't care how expensive her nails were. She didn't ask for gloves. She just worked. And when it was done, she dried her hands, looked at Marcus, and whispered, Thank you. He didn't smile, not yet, but he nodded once. That was enough. In the days that followed, something strange happened. Veronica's video from that night before she'd asked it to be turned off leaked anyway. Only this time, it wasn't the one she expected. A staff member had filmed a short clip, her laughing arrogantly at the food, and then, later, quietly scrubbing dishes beside a young Haitian prep cook. It went viral. But not for the reason she feared. The comments were filled not with mockery but awe. This woman actually learned something. Chef Marcus is a genius. I've never seen someone humbled so honestly. I cried watching her eat. That dish must have been magic. Veronica didn't run from the headlines. She didn't deny the arrogance or blame stress. She went on a podcast the following week and told the entire story herself. I laughed at a black chef because of his skin, she said plainly. I mocked food that was made with generations of love. I'm not proud of who I was, but I'm grateful for who I met. Marcus Johnson changed me, and people listened. Reservations at Le Papillon Noir tripled overnight. Food critics returned and wrote about more than taste. They wrote about soul, about history, about redemption. But Marcus didn't care about the fame. He still worked quietly. He still took out the trash himself. He still walked his mother home after every dinner service. One evening, Veronica returned not in heels, not in silk, but in jeans, with a notebook in hand. "I'm writing a book," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A cookbook." She shook her head. "A memoir. About the night that changed my life." He said nothing, just stirred the sauce in his pan. "Do you think it's stupid?" she asked. He looked over at her finally, and this time he smiled. "Not if it's honest." That night, she sat at the counter and watched every dish come to life. Watched the stories unfold in flavors and smells and steam. And when her plate arrived, she bowed her head not in prayer, but in gratitude. Then she lifted her fork and began to remember again. The rain fell in a steady rhythm against the windows of Le Papillon Noir 2 weeks later when Veronica returned. Not as a guest, but as a woman on a mission. The sky was heavy, gray with memory, but inside the restaurant, the warmth was still alive. Laughter bubbled from a table of elderly regulars. Soft jazz played beneath the clinks of wine glasses. And in the open kitchen, Marcus stood at the stove like a captain at sea, unshaken, centered, commanding. She stood near the entrance for a moment, watching him move. There was grace in his every step, confidence in his quiet. He wasn't like any chef she'd known. He wasn't interested in theatrics or fame. He simply cooked, and when he did, people remembered things they didn't know they'd forgotten. Veronica walked slowly toward the kitchen, this time without cameras, without pretense. Her book outline clutched in her hand like a fragile offering. Marcus saw her and gave a small nod. Back again. "I need to talk," she said. He stepped aside, motioning to the empty bar stool at the end of the chef's counter. She sat. He plated a dish in silence, then said, "You want coffee?" She nodded. "Please." He poured it himself, setting the cup in front of her with no ceremony. She took a sip and exhaled. "I can't stop thinking about that night." Marcus didn't look up. "Because of the food, because of everything. You, your mother, that kitchen, me." He glanced at her now, waiting. Veronica's hands trembled slightly. "I've been lying to myself for years, Marcus, pretending I was someone else. I cut ties with my family back in Baton Rouge because I didn't want people to know where I came from. I told myself they were small-minded, poor, not worth remembering. But you," her voice broke, "you brought it all back with one bite of oxtail." She pulled out her notebook and slid it across to him. "I want to dedicate this to you, to your food, your story, but I also want to get it right. That means telling your story too." Marcus hesitated. "My story isn't clean," he said quietly. "It's not the kind you put on book covers." "Good," she said, "because mine's not either." Marcus leaned back, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked at her for a long time, and then, as though turning a hidden key, he began. "I was 13 when my father left," he said. "Left my mother with nothing but debt and 3 hungry mouths to feed. She worked 2 jobs, nights at a hotel, days at a laundromat, and still, she made us sit at the table every evening, no matter how little we had." Veronica listened, eyes wide. She used to say, "Food is how we survive, but it's also how we remember who we are." At the time, I thought she just meant cooking. I didn't understand she meant dignity, culture, love. He poured himself a cup of coffee and took a slow sip. "When I was 16, I got arrested. Stupid fight at school. Cops roughed me up bad, said I looked like I was resisting, broke my wrist." Veronica gasped. "But you know what hurt worse?" Marcus said, eyes hard now. The way the judge looked at me. Like I was already guilty. Like I was never going to be anything more than a mugshot. "What happened?" she asked softly. "I got probation. Barely. But I never forgot that feeling. So I started cooking. Every night, every spare minute. I took books out of the library, watched old French chefs on VHS, practiced on bruised produce from the food bank." Veronica was speechless. Eventually, I scraped together enough for culinary school, Marcus said. Worked at 3 restaurants just to stay enrolled. Slept in my car one winter. Ate scraps. Burned my hands more times than I can count. But I graduated. Top of my class. He looked at her now, direct. And even then, when I had the skills, the certificates, the drive, most kitchens still saw me as a black-lined cook, not a chef. I was passed over, shouted at, degraded, underpaid. Veronica swallowed hard. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. It made me sharper, stronger, and when I finally saved enough to open this place, I made one promise to myself: this kitchen would never mirror the ones I suffered in. My staff would feel seen, respected. Veronica reached for his hand impulsively. He allowed it. I want to help tell this story, she whispered, the real one, not just for me, but for everyone who never hears it, everyone who needs to. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, okay, but if we do this, you have to meet the people behind this place. You have to listen to them. This isn't just about me, Veronica nodded. Tell me where to start. So he did. Over the next 3 weeks, Veronica returned daily. She interviewed Luis, who had once been undocumented and worked 14-hour days in silence. She met Nia, the pastry chef who fled an abusive home at 17 and found safety in Marcus's kitchen. She spent an afternoon shadowing Grace, the hostess who had studied opera but found purpose in hospitality when no stage would have her. Each story became a chapter. Each dish: rosemary lamb with sweet yam puree, fried green tomatoes with saffron aioli, duck confit with cornbread dust, was more than flavor. It was testimony. Veronica began to transform, not just in her writing, but in her heart. One night, she brought her mother to the restaurant. They hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years. Her mother, Eileen, was quiet at first, worn hands folded in her lap, unsure why she'd been invited to a place she'd never afford on her own. But then the food arrived, and with it, the healing. The gumbo starter made Eileen close her eyes in reverence. The fried okra made her laugh for the first time in years. And the final dish, banana pudding with brewed vanilla cream, brought tears. Across the table, Veronica was crying too. I forgot how much I missed this, she whispered. Her mother reached across and took her hand. It's not too late, baby. And it wasn't. Later that night, Marcus came by their table. Veronica stood and embraced him. You did this, she whispered. No, Marcus said with a soft smile. You did. You just needed to taste who you were again. The book was published 3 months later. Taste of Truth hit shelves with modest expectations and exploded. It wasn't a cookbook. It wasn't a memoir. It was both. Part biography, part confession, part ode to the people who cook in shadows and serve in silence. It told of pain, of prejudice, of redemption, of flavor. It told of the moment one arrogant woman tasted something so honest it cracked her soul wide open. Veronica refused to keep the profits. Every cent went into a foundation for underrepresented chefs, founded by her and Marcus together. The Soul Table Initiative trained and funded Black and brown culinary students, giving them not just the tools, but the stage. 1 year later, Le Papillon Noir expanded. A second location opened in Harlem, and this time, it wasn't Marcus at the helm. It was Luis, promoted to executive chef, and the line cook from Haiti, now a Sioux. On the grand opening night, reporters swarmed. But one moment silenced the room. Veronica took the stage beside Marcus. She wore no makeup, no glitz, just an apron and truth. I once laughed at a black chef, she said into the mic, voice steady. I thought I was better than him. And then he fed me the truth. She turned to Marcus. And I cried, and I changed. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never forget how that tasted. The crowd rose in applause. Marcus stepped forward, said only this: food can break us open, but it can also heal what was never supposed to be broken in the first place. That night, in kitchens around the country, line cooks dared to dream bigger. Servers held their heads higher. And somewhere in Baton Rouge, a little girl stirred a pot of oxtail soup with her grandmother smiling, hungry, and unafraid of who she'd become. Months passed, but the echo of that night never faded. Veronica's book, Taste of Truth, remained a bestseller, but more importantly, it became a movement. Book clubs gathered not only to discuss the words, but to share their own food memories, their own biases, their own journeys of unlearning and opening. High schools across the country invited Marcus to speak. At first, he declined every invitation. He wasn't one for stages or applause. But then he got a letter from a 15-year-old boy in Cleveland. I thought I'd never be more than the kid who got stared at the gas station. But after reading your story, I saved up, bought a little skillet, and started cooking for my mom. She smiled for the first time in weeks. Thank you for showing me I'm not invisible. That letter broke something open in Marcus he hadn't known was closed. He agreed to speak, not just in Cleveland, but in Detroit, Atlanta, Memphis, Compton, and beyond. He didn't lecture, he cooked on stage, told stories through flavor, brought students up to help him, let them taste pride for the first time. Veronica joined him on many of those trips. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she just listened. But always, she was present without her camera crew, without filters, without armor. One evening, in a high school auditorium in Newark, something unexpected happened. A girl with braids and quiet eyes raised her hand during the Q&A. Chef Marcus, she said shyly, what do you do when people laugh at you before you even speak? The room held its breath. Marcus stepped down from the stage, walked straight to her, and handed her his ladle. When they laugh, he said gently, let them. Then feed them something so powerful they cry. And never stop cooking from the place they tried to make you hide. The auditorium erupted. Veronica stood backstage, tears streaming, clutching her notes but not needing them. Her hands trembled not from nerves but from awe. Later that night, back at their hotel, she said, you're changing lives. Marcus, you have no idea how big this is. Marcus leaned against the windowsill, gazing out at the city lights. I'm not trying to be big. I'm just trying to be honest. That's all I ever wanted. She moved beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. Do you remember the night I mocked your duck? He chuckled. Hard to forget. I hated myself for weeks after that. You should have hated the lies that made you act that way. He corrected gently. Not yourself. She looked up at him. I used to think I was above soul food, above small towns, above people like you. But now I understand I wasn't above anything. I was just lost and afraid of being seen. He nodded. We all wear masks until someone cooks them off. They stood there, silent, watching the rain begin to fall against the glass. The same rhythm, the same music that played the night they met. 2 years later, on the 5th anniversary of Le Papillon Noir's opening, the restaurant was nearly unrecognizable, yet exactly the same. There were 2 new locations, one in Oakland, one in New Orleans, run by a former dishwasher turned chef. The Soul Table Initiative had raised over $7 million and helped fund more than 300 culinary educations. And on this anniversary night, the original Manhattan location was full of alumni, former prep cooks, servers, Dutchers, just hosts, all now running kitchens, writing books, starting their own legacies. Marcus stood at the center of it all, wearing the same black apron he always had, with Martha beside him, now older but still graceful, her eyes full of stories. Veronica stood by the entrance, welcoming guests, not as a VIP, but as a friend. Her second book, Salt and Smoke, was due out in spring, a deeper exploration of identity, memory, and food as resistance. It had already been optioned for a docuseries. That night, just before closing, Marcus called for quiet. He stepped into the center of the room, lifting a glass of sweet tea. I don't usually talk much, he began, but tonight, I need to. The crowd chuckled. When I opened this place, I thought I was building a restaurant. Turns out I was building a mirror, a mirror to show people who they really are through food. And I've watched people come in angry, proud, broken, arrogant, afraid. And I've watched them walk out full, not just in their stomachs, but in their hearts. He glanced at Veronica. One woman came in laughing at what she didn't understand. Now she's one of the fiercest truth-tellers I know. That's the power of a plate. It can humble you. It can remind you. And if you let it, it can change you. Veronica lowered her head. Overcome? A soft ripple of applause moved through the room. Marcus raised his glass higher. To the chefs who were never seen, to the food that speaks when words fail, and to the people brave enough to taste the truth. The room erupted. People clapped, cried, hugged. And somewhere in the dark corner, Martha whispered, "You did good, baby, real good." After the celebration ended and the last guests had trickled out, Marcus stood in the darkened kitchen, wiping down his station by hand, just as he always had. Veronica stepped beside him. "Still cleaning," she teased. "Always," he said with a smile. "Clean kitchen, clean soul." She leaned in close. "I think it's time," she said. "For what?" She smiled. "For your own cookbook." He laughed. "You think anyone wants my recipes?" She looked at him like he was the only man on earth. "They want your truth. The recipes are just how it tastes." He considered that. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Okay," he said, "but only if we do it together." Veronica grinned. "We started with oxtail. Let's end with a feast." And they did. Together, they wrote Plates of Fire, a cookbook filled not only with recipes, but with scars, triumphs, love letters to forgotten kitchens, and handwritten notes from every person who passed through Le Papillon Noir's doors. The dedication read, "To the ones who laughed before tasting and cried when they finally understood." In the end, it wasn't just a dish that changed Veronica Kingsley. It was a moment of truth. Served hot, unfiltered, unapologetic. And every time someone else tasted it, they were reminded of something powerful, that food isn't just flavor, it's memory, it's healing, it's love. And above all, it's the truth waiting to be tasted. Years rolled on like soft waves over sand. Le Papillon Noir stood not just as a restaurant, but as a landmark, a living archive of transformation and truth. The kind of place that tourists whispered about reverently and locals treated like sacred ground. More than once, a stranger would walk in, take a seat, order the oxtail, and weep without knowing exactly why. The story of Veronica and Marcus had long since gone viral. But what lasted wasn't the headlines or the hashtags. It was the quiet revolutions they started in kitchens, in classrooms, in hearts. One brisk autumn afternoon, long after the initial storm of fame had settled, Marcus stood alone on the rooftop garden above the original Manhattan location. Around him, the herbs swayed gently: basil, thyme, mint, collards, sage. He pinched a sprig of rosemary, brought it to his nose, and closed his eyes. Footsteps approached. Veronica appeared beside him, wrapped in a gray coat, holding 2 mugs of tea. "I figured you'd be up here," she said, handing him one. "Needed a minute," Marcus replied. "You know how it is," she nodded, sipping her own mug. "You thinking about her?" He looked out at the skyline. Every day. It had been a year since Martha passed, peacefully, in her sleep, after tasting one last bite of Marcus's gumbo, his best batch. She had said, smiling with tired eyes, she had lived long enough to see her son become more than successful. He had become seen. "I'm naming the new foundation after her," Veronica said. "Martha's Table. Scholarships for single mothers who want to study culinary arts." Marcus said nothing for a while. Then, "She would have liked that. She would have told us to add more cayenne." Veronica smiled through tears. They stood in silence again, sipping tea and remembering. Far below them, the restaurant pulsed with life. The latest class of Soul Table mentees was hosting its first pop-up event. The youngest chef was only 19. The pastry chef, a single father who used to sleep on the subway. The servers, all formerly incarcerated individuals given a second chance, and every dish on the menu tonight, created from scratch, rooted in memory, seasoned with truth. You ever think, Veronica whispered, about how it all started? Marcus chuckled softly. Oh, I remember. You called my food mediocre before even tasting it. I was horrible. You were lost, he corrected. Big difference. She looked at him. And you gave me a dish that opened my soul. He finally turned to her, his expression gentle. I didn't cook for you. I cooked for the silence in you that needed to be fed. That line would later become the epigraph in her third book. They finished their tea. Below, laughter echoed from the patio. Music floated up like memory. Somewhere, someone bit into a dish that would change them forever. Marcus exhaled slowly. I used to dream about owning one restaurant. Veronica smiled. You own 7 now. No, he said. I own one truth. And it just has 7 kitchens. A quiet breeze passed over them, lifting the rosemary, ruffling their coats, carrying something unseen but deeply felt. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. He handed it to Veronica. She opened it. It was written in delicate cursive, clearly his mother's hand. One day, someone will laugh at your food. Son, let them. You just make sure that when they taste it, they never laugh again. Veronica covered her mouth, the tears returning fresh and real. He took the note back, folded it carefully, and tucked it near his heart. Neither of them said anything for a long time, and they didn't have to, because sometimes the taste of truth lingers longer than words.